we begin, a quick note. A new companion series is coming soon, Out of State. Short journeys into legends beyond America's borders. Launching next week, right here in the feed. Make sure you're following so you don't miss it. Now, on to the show.
They say midnight hits different in the Delta. The air thickens. The insects hush. And somewhere, beneath a crooked tree at the edge of an old dirt road, a man waits. He's holding a guitar. The strings are silent. But he's not alone. Because this is a crossroads. And in places like this, old promises echo. Somewhere between myth and memory, they say Robert Johnson stood at the fork of two roads, offering his soul in exchange for sound. And what he got in return was something that still haunts the blues to this day. This is more than just folklore. It's a story born in the dirt fields of Mississippi, where a sharecropper's son vanished into the night and returned playing like a man possessed. A man whose music would outlive him, whose death would raise more questions than answers, and whose legend, black man, guitar in hand, shadow behind him, would shape America's most haunted genre. I'm your host, Robert Barber, and today we journey south, deep into the cracked soil and swaying fields of 1930s Mississippi, where music was currency and stories were survival. This is the tale of crossroads and curses, of a man who may have sold more than just his talent. This is the legend of Robert Johnson. And this is State of the Unknown. The Mississippi Delta in the 1930s wasn't the birthplace of the blues, but it was the cradle. Rocked not by gentle hands, but by cotton sacks, Jim Crow, and dirt road desperation. This was no gentle delta of flowing rivers and soft meadows. This was a wedge of land pressed flat between the Yazoo and Mississippi rivers. Hot, heavy, and haunted. The soil was dark and rich, good for cotton, bad for the people who picked it. It clung to boots. It swallowed wheels. It bred mosquitoes by the millions and soaked up the blood of anyone foolish enough to forget where they stood. This was the Deep South, sun-baked and superstition-soaked. A place where the devil didn't need horns or fire, just a drought and a whisper in the ear of a man with nothing to lose. To be black here was to be hunted by silence. Not always by violence, though there was plenty of that, but by the quiet weight of second-class citizenship. Laws didn't protect. Doctors didn't come. Opportunity didn't knock. Most lived as sharecroppers, trading their labor for a place on the very land their ancestors had once been enslaved on. They worked from before sunrise to long after sunset. Backs bent. Futures sold. A good year meant breaking even. A bad one meant debt that followed you like a ghost. There was no electricity in the fields. No radios in most homes. No cars unless you were rich or white. But there was music. Sweet, dirty, aching music. It came from porches and juke joints, from harmonicas and bent-neck guitars strung with twine and hope. It came from the church and from the barrel house, sometimes in the same breath. Saturday nights were sacred, not for God, for release. After 6 days of sweat and silence, people gathered where they could. Ramshackle buildings strung with bare bulbs, moonshine in coffee tins, and sawdust on the floors. And there, someone would play. Maybe on a guitar with 3 strings and no frets. Maybe on a bottle turned sideways. Didn't matter. What mattered was the sound. The blues was more than music. It was medicine. It was memory. It was the only thing that couldn't be taxed or stolen. And from this hothouse of pain and power, grew a music that shook the nation. But long before it filled theaters in New York or clubs in Chicago, it haunted the Delta. And somewhere in that haunted soil, a young man was born. Poor, thin, restless, carrying a guitar and a hunger no meal could touch. His name was Robert Johnson, and the music he brought back from the fields sounded like it came from somewhere far deeper. He was born in Hazelhurst, Mississippi in 1911, or maybe Robinsonville. Even that's debated, because Robert Johnson's life was stitched together from fragments, half memories, secondhand stories, and church registries too faded to read. He was born illegitimate to a field laborer named Julia Major Dodds. His father, Noah Johnson, vanished early, and Robert carried his mother's husband's last name, Spencer, before taking Johnson later. He was one of 11 children. Poor, black, southern, invisible. As a boy, he was drawn to music. Street performers, guitar players with 3 strings and a dollar hat, church hymns bleeding into juke joint rhythms. By the time he was a teenager, he had picked up the guitar himself, but according to those who knew him then, he wasn't good. He tried, he practiced, but his fingers couldn't keep up with the fire in his mind. And then, one day, he disappeared. For months, he was gone. No one saw him. No one heard him. He just vanished from the scene. And when he came back, he could play like nobody else. Son House, a blues pioneer and preacher, remembered it clearly. Before Robert left, House said he drove people nuts. They'd chase him off stage. But when he returned, he was so good, people's mouths hung open. It wasn't just skill. It was something else, something uncanny. His fingers flew down the fretboard. His voice carried the weight of a man much older. And his songs, they had an edge, a darkness, a knowledge no 20-year-old should have. He was rail thin, long-legged, always moving, a drifter. He played wherever he could. Storefronts, back porches, juke joints, roadhouses. He didn't just perform, he haunted. People said he played with his back to the crowd, that his eyes rolled back in his head when he sang, that he could be in 2 places at once. In Greenwood one night, in Clarksdale the same. 2 towns, 2 guitars, 1 name. He never settled, not in one town, not with one woman. He was married once, as a teenager. His wife, Virginia, died giving birth. After that, he wandered. Some said he was cursed. Others said he chose the road. But whatever he was chasing, it drove him deeper into the Delta and deeper into legend. If you know one thing about Robert Johnson, you know the story. A man goes walking at midnight, a guitar slung across his back, dust on his boots, something darker in his heart. He comes to a crossroads, two dirt roads meeting in an empty field, quiet as a grave. And there, he waits for a man, or a shadow, or something in between. They say the figure that appears isn't human. Tall, impeccably dressed, eyes like pitch, voice like velvet. He takes the guitar, tunes it, plays a few chords, sweeter and stranger than anything the man has ever heard. Then he hands it back. The deal is done. And the price? The man walks away changed. Not richer, not wiser, just better. Too good. Unnervingly good. So good it stops people mid-step. So good it can't be explained. That's the legend. And for Robert Johnson, it fit too well. Because before he vanished, he was average, decent, unremarkable, trying to play like Son House and getting laughed off porches. And then he disappeared, vanished for months. No one saw him. When he returned, he was electric. People couldn't believe it was the same man. His guitar didn't just accompany him. It echoed, answered, wept. He could play rhythm, lead, and bass lines simultaneously. Slide up the neck and down the soul. His fingers danced. His voice wailed like a man possessed. And people began to talk. Not just admiration, fear. How do you go from novice to legend in a season? You don't. Not without help. Not without a price. It was around this time the Crossroads began to show up. In whispers, in lyrics, in the fevered storytelling of the Delta. But here's what most people miss. The Crossroads legend didn't start with Robert Johnson. Decades earlier, bluesman Tommy Johnson, no relation, claimed he sold his soul to the devil to learn guitar. He even bragged about it on stage. This wasn't just showmanship. It was currency. In a world where being black and poor meant being invisible, sounding like a god or a demon got you noticed. The idea of making deals with dark powers wasn't new. Not in America, not in the South, not in the black community. In African cosmology, traditions carried through the Middle Passage and into hoodoo, voodoo, and Southern folklore, the Crossroads was a sacred place. The Yoruba deity Ishu and the Haitian Papa Legba were known as gatekeepers between the spirit world and the living. Tricksters, intermediaries, standing at the meeting of two roads, offering wisdom, but always at a cost. Over time, these figures were demonized, morphed into devils in the eyes of the white colonizers, recast in Christian terms. And so, by the 20th century, that old spiritual crossroads wasn't just a place of power, it became a place of danger. A place where a poor man with too much desire and not enough future could try to change his fate with a tune, a deal, a signature in blood. So when Robert Johnson returned with Fingers Like Fire and Songs That Bled Darkness, no one needed to guess what happened. They knew. And if you listened close, the clues are in the music. I went down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees, asked the Lord above, have mercy now, save poor Bob if you please. He wasn't boasting, he was pleading, begging to be saved. From what? From who? The crossroads, in the end, isn't just about geography. It's about choice. It's about desperation. It's about what you'll give up to become something more. Robert Johnson may not have invented that legend, but he made it real. And once the myth had his name, it never let go. Robert Johnson recorded only 29 songs, 2 sessions, one in San Antonio in 1936, the other in Dallas the following year. That's all the world was given. But within that small body of work is something vast, haunting, unfinished, like chapters torn from a diary written too close to the fire. The recordings are raw, crackling under the weight of time. You can hear the room, the breath between verses, the ghost of a man caught on shellac. The sound isn't polished. It doesn't care to be. It claws its way out of the speakers, dragging you back to some unlit room, where a man in a rumpled shirt leans over a steel-stringed guitar like it's the only thing keeping him alive. Johnson's guitar work was decades ahead of its time. He used alternate tunings that let him create bass lines, rhythm, and melody all at once. At times, it sounds like 2 players. At others, like a duel between man and instrument, a constant tension, one leading, the other resisting. His right hand never stopped, steady, hypnotic. His left danced between chords and slide runs, wringing emotion from the strings like they owed him something. This wasn't learned in school. This was learned in fields, in funeral processions, in juke joints where sweat dripped from the ceilings. It was born from pain, polished in isolation. His voice, too, was different. It was high, nasal, strained, yet unshakable. When he sang, it wasn't performance. It was testimony. And what he testified to was rarely hopeful. More often, it was haunted. In the song Hellhound on My Trail, you can hear the terror. Not just fear of death, but fear of pursuit, of something unseen that's always closing in. I got to keep moving. I got to keep moving. Blues falling down like hail, and the days keep on worrying me. There's a hellhound on my trail. There's a desperation in the rhythm, like he's running and singing at the same time. Crossroad Blues is even more explicit. I went down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees, asked the Lord above, have mercy now, save poor Bob if you please. He's not bragging, he's begging. This isn't about rebellion, it's about salvation. It's a prayer disguised as a blues riff, Then there's Me and the Devil Blues, the one that leaves the most chills. Early this morning, when you knocked upon my door, and I said, "Hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go." There's no metaphor here, no subtlety. The devil isn't a symbol, he's punctual. But Robert didn't just write about darkness. He wrote about love, longing, loss. In Love in Vain, the imagery softens. A train leaving the station becomes a symbol of heartbreak, of helplessness. When the train left the station, with 2 lights on behind, the blue light was my blues, and the red light was my mind. That's not myth. That's mourning. It's easy to focus only on the devil, the deals, and the darkness. But Johnson's lyrics were human, deeply so. He wasn't just building a legend, he was burying his feelings beneath metaphor, encoding grief in chords, concealing truth in verses. Each song feels like a confession, but never a full one. He gives us fragments, enough to haunt, never enough to resolve. And that's the genius of it. Not the virtuosity, not the myth, the ambiguity. You can listen 100 times and still not know whether he was crying out for redemption or simply documenting what he saw in the mirror every night. In those 29 recordings, Robert Johnson left behind more than melodies. He left riddles, warnings, wounds. And maybe, if you listen closely enough, a map back to the crossroads. Robert Johnson died young, only 27, the same age later claimed by Hendrix, Joplin, and Cobain. But Johnson, he was the first. And the way he died, that's where the story thickens. The official records? Sparse. Some say he died on August 16, 1938, in Greenwood, Mississippi. But there's no death certificate, no autopsy, no funeral photos. Just word of mouth, stories passed from mouth to ear like gospel. The most accepted version goes like this. He was playing at a juke joint outside Greenwood, flirting with a married woman. Too much whiskey, too many smiles. And her husband noticed. Someone offered Johnson a bottle that night, a glass of poisoned whiskey. Some say it was laced with strychnine. Others say it was mercury or arsenic. Whatever it was, he drank, and he started to shake. Witnesses said he fell ill fast, vomiting, convulsing, crawling on all fours. Not for hours, for days. 3 full days, wailing, howling, scratching at the walls like a dog. When Son House was told Johnson had died, he didn't ask how. He just nodded. "Yeah," he said. "The devil got his due." That's what stuck. Not the poison, not the murder, the payment. Because when a man writes songs about deals with the devil and dies screaming in the dirt at 27, no one remembers the bar fight. They remember the bargain. Some say his soul was collected. Others claim the devil never gave him talent, just took what was already his. There are even stories, whispers from those who saw him in those final hours, that Robert Johnson spoke to someone as he died. Not to a doctor, not to a preacher, to something else. 3 unmarked graves in Mississippi claim to hold his body. No one knows which, if any, is true. And maybe that's the point. Because legends don't rest easy. especially not when they die screaming, and especially not when they die at 27. When Robert Johnson died, there was no obituary, no funeral of note. Just a pine box, a patch of dirt, and silence. His name faded quickly, too quickly for what he left behind. But something strange happened. Even in death, especially in death, he wouldn't stay buried. Because the recording survived. Crackling 78s, brittle and narrow, carried his voice like a phantom in the grooves. They were grainy, primitive, but beneath the static was something unmistakable. The blueprint. Robert Johnson's music wasn't just a landmark in the blues. It was the foundation of modern American sound. His phrasing, his storytelling, his guitar work. These became the bones of rock and roll, of folk, of country, of hip-hop, soul, funk, and everything in between. In the 1960s, when white America and Europe rediscovered the blues, they traced it back, past the radio, past the Chicago clubs, and they found Johnson, waiting. Eric Clapton called him the most important blues musician who ever lived. Keith Richards thought there had to be two guitarists on the record because no man could do that alone. Bob Dylan said hearing Johnson for the first time was like meeting a ghost. And from there, the thread unspooled. You don't get the Rolling Stones without Robert Johnson. You don't get Led Zeppelin or the White Stripes. You don't get Bob Dylan or Johnny Cash or even Jimi Hendrix, who rewired Johnson's raw energy into psychedelic voltage. But it doesn't stop with guitars. Jay-Z has referenced him. So has Kendrick Lamar. The myth of the Crossroads, the artist who trades peace of mind for the power of voice, echoes through every verse, every loop, every haunted beat. Robert Johnson planted something. Not a genre, a seed. And that seed grew into the musical language of America. The tension between pain and pride, beauty and grit, art and survival. When Columbia Records released King of the Delta Blues Singers in 1961, it was more than a compilation. It was a resurrection. And in 1990, the complete recordings sold over 1 million copies. From unknown to platinum, from juke joints to the Library of Congress. Today, there are statues in his name, plaques, museums, essays. 3 separate graves claim to hold his bones. But his real legacy? It's not in the ground. It's in the air. Every time someone picks up a guitar and tells the truth, raw, unfiltered, and aching, Robert Johnson is there. He didn't just influence American music. He authored it. Not with volume, but with velocity. Not with visibility, but with gravity. A man who had nothing, who made something eternal. And if you trace the music back far enough, all roads lead to the same place. Not a studio, not a stage, but a crossroads. So what really happened at that crossroads? Was there a deal? Was there a devil? Or was Robert Johnson just brilliant? Music historians say it's simple. He practiced. He studied tunings, learned rhythmic precision, copied players like Ike Zimmerman, an elusive bluesman rumored to give lessons in graveyards at midnight. Yes, graveyards. They say Johnson didn't sell his soul, he honed it. Day after day, night after night, in places where only the dead could hear. And when he came back to town, it sounded like sorcery. because no one had heard playing like his before. But others argue this view flattens the myth, that it ignores what black Southern artists were really doing. See, the Crossroads. It wasn't just superstition, it was survival. It was a symbol. A place where you confront choice, risk, sacrifice. It's where two paths meet, and only one lets you leave with something worth keeping. Johnson's legend didn't grow just because of what he played. It grew because of what it meant. He was a poor black man in the Jim Crow South, and yet he made something transcendent, something people couldn't explain. So they made it magical. They made it myth. And that myth did something powerful. It preserved him. It made sure that the name Robert Johnson wouldn't just fade into dusty jukeboxes or scratched vinyl. It gave him immortality. The devil in this story might not be evil. He might be freedom. He might be the price every artist pays when they reach too far, want too much, and burn too bright. And Robert Johnson, he burned hot, fast, and left the rest of us squinting at the smoke. He only lived 27 years. He left behind just 29 songs. And yet, Robert Johnson looms over music like a shadow at dusk. He wasn't the first bluesman. He didn't start the Crossroads myth. But somehow, his story became the one we remember. Because it's not just about a man and a guitar. It's about transformation. About the fear and beauty of being too good, too fast, too soon. Maybe he made a deal. Maybe he didn't. But one thing's for sure. He left something behind. In the dust. In the music. In that dark Delta air. Today, his name lives in liner notes, in statues, in rock and blues halls of fame. But if you ask the old folks, the ones who grew up on that red clay land, they'll tell you something else. They'll tell you not to walk the crossroads at night. Not with a guitar, not alone. Because deals still get made. And music still has a price. This has been State of the Unknown. Every other week, we walk the haunted highways of America, where legends breathe and the dead sometimes hum a tune. Don't let this story vanish in the dark. Right now, tap the stars and leave a quick review if you dare. That's how the algorithm knows to spread these tales before they're forgotten. And don't forget, next time you hear something strange in the wind, listen close. It might be the devil, or it might just be the blues.